Anything else on behalf of the defendant? Ms. Harold.
Your Honor, the government filed a request to reconsider this court's previous order with regard to B6.
Right.
If the court is going to entertain reconsidering that prior to doing it, we'd ask an opportunity to reply.
I was going to direct you to reply. How much time do you need? Is 14 days enough?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, so I'll give the defense 14 days to respond to that motion. I'll issue a written order in that regard. All right, thank you. We'll be in recess.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. That was Boulder District Court Judge Thomas Mulvahill reading Alyssa his rights, and he was also telling the defendant and I guess his defense counsel that the court was going to wait to make a decision on bail until late in the hearing. I don't really think he's got to worry about that. I really don't think he's going to get bail. Until then, he will remain in jail where he's been since he was discharged from the hospital, where he was treated for a bullet wound that had gone through and through during the rampage on Monday at the King Soopers supermarket in Boulder. During the hearing, Alyssa didn't say anything. All he said was, at one point he just answered yes when the judge asked him whether he understood his rights. According to the Denver Post, this is the first hearing, and they describe what is going to lie ahead for him as a lengthy court process. So whatever this particular person was going through, whatever he was doing day to day before the shooting in Boulder, everything's going to change. He's now going to be in and out of court, speaking to lawyers, and then he can probably look forward to a very long prison term, very long period of incarceration. Bear in mind, he's 21 years old, so it's a lot similar to the situation that Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the Boston bomber, the younger brother of the Tsarnaevs, is facing. If you're not familiar with that case, go and check it out. It's a video posted a couple of days ago. Something I'm surprised no one has highlighted. Alyssa's attorney, public defender, is Catherine Herold. She's the same woman who sat on Chris Watts's right-hand side, on the left as we were viewing him, while the sentencing hearing was playing out on November the 19th, 2018. And do you remember she made a very brief statement on his behalf? So just to refresh our memories, let's listen in to Catherine Herold speaking on behalf of Chris Watts.
Mr. Walls, will you be speaking on behalf of your client?
Your Honor, Ms. Harold.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Harold.
Good morning, Your Honor. Mr. Watts has asked us to share this morning that he is devastated by all of this. And although he understands that words are hollow at this point, he is sincerely sorry for all of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think if Chris Watts was sincerely sorry, he would have addressed the court. I mean, you just had his father-in-law, his brother-in-law, his mother-in-law, his mother and his father addressing the court all in tears, and then he sat there kind of bouncing his leg in one place, and then his public defender says something that does come across as hollow at the end of the day. I don't know if you think about his first confession, his second confession, his third confession, and all the confessions that have followed, all of them sort of feel a little bit hollow, don't they? They feel a little bit disingenuous. In any event, I do think it feels like a small legal world in that part of Colorado, the fact that Catherine Herold is defending someone as notorious as her client in this case. In what she said at the time is that, and this is a quote from the Denver Post, "We cannot do anything until we can fully assess Mr. Alyssa's mental illness. We cannot begin to assess the nature and depth of Mr. Alyssa's mental illness until we have the discovery from the government," end quote. I think it's already jumping to a conclusion that he's got mental illness. I don't think he's got mental illness at all. It would be interesting to know whether he's received any treatment. I doubt whether he has. Whether he's got an attitude problem, I think, is a different kettle of fish. I do think what is interesting, if you compare the situation with Alyssa to Chris Watts, that Chris Watts could also have theoretically have relied on a mental illness defense. I don't know how I killed my family. I must have been mentally ill, something like that, and then have himself assessed in the same way that Letitia Stork was assessed. It seems like the go-to way to do this. Just by the way, if you count Shanann's unborn child as a person, and I think a lot of people do, the 15-week-old fetus, then that would, Chris Watts would meet the requirements for a mass killing, which is the killing of 4 or more people in one go. And the fact that it was his own family makes it particularly heinous, doesn't it? In the article by the Denver Post, and I'll put a link to it in the description, they say that at this point it's unknown whether Alyssa will enter a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, or whether his attorneys will pursue a formal mental health evaluation through the state hospital. As far as I am concerned, I think what they're going to do is they're going to assess his mental health, and based on that, they're going to decide how he's going to plea. It's interesting, if it is determined that he's got a mental illness, that won't automatically mean he's criminally insane. Now, the Aurora shooter did actually manage to win some sympathy for a kind of a mental illness in his particular case. Someone else who managed to get somewhere with that defense was the Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe. And so this is exactly what the Denver Post mentions in its final paragraph of the article. It says, several men suspected or convicted in recent Colorado mass shootings have used incompetency as a defense, often substantially lengthening court proceedings. So you're going to have a lot of experts coming in to determine competency. As far as I remember, Nicholas Cruz was another one who relied on that in the beginning or at one stage. As I mentioned, and this is what the Denver Post highlights, the Aurora Theater shooter entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity in 2013, but jurors convicted him at trial in 2015 and found he was competent enough to know right from wrong. That said, I think his sentence was nevertheless mitigated by how they found his mental competence. So if we just highlight that particular case where James Holmes's father testified in his defense and basically said that, pleaded for his son's life, saying that he's severely mentally ill. And I think his sister said something else about his brother becoming withdrawn, right? But anyway, ultimately, Holmes was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on August the 7th, after jurors failed to reach a unanimous decision after sentencing him to death. Now, I've certainly on Patreon, I've had this discussion about the efficacy of the death penalty, and you get some people who don't even want to have that conversation. It's basically, the death penalty is immoral, right? But if you think about it, some people say, well, in countries where you have the death penalty, it does nothing to change crimes. Now, if you think about America and specifically Colorado, if you have the death penalty and you don't use it, I don't know if you can make the argument that the death penalty isn't effective or is effective. If you have a stick like that and you don't use it, you can't argue its effectiveness if you're not using it. And I remember both in the Jodi Arias case, as an outsider, as a non-American, the Jodi Arias case and the Holmes case, thinking it was something that was repeated, I think, both times, where they said, if this case doesn't warrant the death penalty, I don't know which case does. And then you do wonder, what on earth is the death penalty for, if you have a situation as you do with the James Holmes case, right, where, a lot of people died, 24 counts of first-degree murder. There's a certain number beyond which the numbers just don't really even matter anymore. You know, if someone is given like a 1,000-year life sentence, they can't possibly serve the sentence that they've been sentenced to, can they? But the James Holmes case was quite interesting in terms of the mental illness argument. At one point, a court-appointed psychiatrist testified that he was mentally ill but legally sane, so you can have that distinction. And personally, I don't think he was mentally ill. I think that whole thing was quite a clever performance. But it's almost like the more gruesome and gratuitous the crime, the easier it is just to dismiss it all as mental illness. And I think people are tempted to do that. James Holmes's defense lawyers basically said that he was having a psychotic episode during the attack. It's quite a convenient loophole that the entire massacre was a psychotic episode. And yet I think if you had to watch the thing from beginning to end, you would see someone acting with intent, with deliberation, with strategic and tactical nous. Do you know what I'm saying? So Alyssa's court appearance today, Thursday, lasted less than 10 minutes and took place in a mostly empty courtroom, according to the Denver Post, although many people tuned in to the proceedings online. Fortunately for Alyssa, he missed the death penalty by 1 year. It was abolished in 2020. And there's some irony around that, especially also regarding what Chris Watts was trying to avoid in late 2018. I'm going to play out with some video and some photos provided by a Patreon member who attended the Boulder Vigil for the people who died at the King Supermarket on Monday afternoon. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.